In last week's video, we talked about recycling music from other songs and combining them to make new ones. If you haven't already seen it, make sure to go watch that video first, as this one will be a continuation. Recycling can be a huge source of new music in its own right. But what can you do when you've exhausted all the possibilities, you've reused all the music you've ever written, and any new combination will just be a rehash of something you've already done and all your friends will call you out for it? Today, I'll give you one stupidly simple trick to get the ideas rolling again and help you extract even more content out of the music you already have. First, here's some context. When producing this album, I initially had 6 songs totaling about 27 minutes of music. I knew what the track order was going to be, but I still felt that some songs didn't quite work right next to each other. But I knew that if I changed the order, it would sound worse. I also felt that 27 minutes of music would be too short for an album, but too long for an EP. So I decided to create 2-minute transitional pieces to go between the songs that I felt didn't really work together. And this would also add a bit of time to the album. I thought that the best and easiest way to bridge the gap between these two songs was to use one distinctive part from the first one and another distinctive part from the second one and combine those two to create a new song. This was how the music in last week's video was conceived, and we're going to continue with the middle section of that song today. Before I say anything, let's just listen to it. Now, if I was listening to this for the first time, I would think that it would be really complicated to make. To me, it sounds like the only way to create this would be to use synths and a lot of complex automation. But this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, there's almost no automation. The simple truth is that all of this section, except for the drums, was created by listening to music in reverse. I'm not sure how exactly I got into this habit, but if I were to guess, I would say that I was so discouraged with what I was working on, and I literally had exhausted all the possibilities, that literally the only thing that I could think of to do was to listen to the music in reverse and see if that sparked any ideas. Without doing anything else, I was already getting ideas for new songs. Okay, so this white track is our original song. You can see it sounds normal. Now we'll reverse it. While listening, I cut the parts that I liked out and set them aside for later. So here are some parts that I like. I like this one. And then some cool reverse piano stuff here. Some big hits coming up here. Then I started listening to the same song in different tunings with the warp off so the timing does change, still in reverse, to see if anything sounded different. Sure enough, it did. Play around with the transposition with making sure that the warp is off to see if anything sounds different. So let's tune it up. So obviously it's not all good, but there's stuff that I'm liking here. So do this enough and you'll start to hear connections of things that might be able to go together, and you'll have enough material to start a new song. Next, I decided to take it a step further to see if I could get even more ideas by running it through some weird effects. Since then, my go-to plugin for this has always been Isotope Trash. I always just let the song play and cycle through some presets and see if anything catches my attention. I could start from scratch and try to create a sound on my own, but I really want to keep my creative juices flowing and keep my decision making as simple as possible by limiting myself to simple yes or no questions. We can always tweak what we find later. So let's reverse engineer this one. So this is what I ended up with. Let's take this back in time over here. This is obviously reversed, so we'll reverse it back again. Already it sounds like normal person music. So now we'll undo the transpose, and the warp is off, so the clip will actually get bigger. And then you just take off the plugins and it sounds like normal. So it's really that easy. Get ready to guess that sound! Today we have Norman on the line, and he is going to guess that sound. Here we go. Norman, guess that sound.
Hi, Nick. Is that a trombone?
Oh, I'm sorry. That is not a trombone. We are going to remove one plugin, and you can guess again.
Gee, Nick, to me that sounds a heck of a lot like Aunt Bertha snoring.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is not Aunt Bertha snoring. And you will have one final guess. Here we go. All right, Norman, last chance to get it right for the grand prize of $6.
Oh, gee, Nick, this is a tough one. Can I call a friend?
You have no friends.
Oh, well then, I'm gonna take a guess and say that it's the sound of shame when you've eaten too much.
Oh, no! It was the sound of a piano. The beauty of working like this is that it's like playing Mad Gab. Rarely will you find an entire section that works on its own in reverse and that sounds like a complete musical idea. You are more likely to find a small nugget of an idea that appeals to you, which you will then have to finish. So as you can hear, it doesn't feel like a full phrase or a full riff or anything, but in my head I can hear where I want it to go. So then we just have to sort of strong arm our way through that. Pretty much all I did was just change the transposition of each clip. So you can see here, this is one clip. It's transposed 9 semitones up. The next one is just 6 semitones up. The next clip is at 0, but it's a different area of that same piano part. So it adds up to a complete phrase. This is good news for you though, because you can spark your own creativity just by giving yourself this cue. Then you can copy paste that little nugget and chop it or tune it to make it into a groove or a riff or something. Or you can use that little nugget as just inspiration for something that you will then write. Combine a bunch of these together and you've got music. Drums will only work in reverse sometimes, as they tend to get tiresome because they don't really have attack or transients. For this, we will take the same approach as last week's video and steal a groove from another song and repurpose it here. This is especially convenient for you if you work in jazz, because your drummer will most likely not repeat something verbatim for minutes at a time. So if you do repurpose something, the listener probably won't know because they will not have had the time to get familiar with it. With the reversed part and the repurposed drum groove, it is important that you get into the habit of making them sound different from your original source material. You'll be missing out on a lot of potential if you don't. At the very minimum, I would recommend giving them a different EQ setting, so that if you heard both of them, you would at least be able to tell them apart by the sound alone. My next go-to effects for this purpose would be reverb and delay, and some kind of distortion. I really encourage you to get freaky with it. So here's what I'm talking about when I say to make this stuff sound different and unique. So here we have these two drum tracks. So if I just left them normal, you can tell that they don't really fit with the weird stuff that's going on top of it. One thing that I like to do is to have slightly different EQ settings on each side. So this is the left side, and then this is the right side, so they're kind of opposite of each other, and it just makes the stereo spread a bit bigger, especially since we're dealing with two mono drum tracks. So here's just with the EQ settings. So they still kind of sound normal. If you add some delay to that, then you can really end up with unique sounding drums that fit more with what's going on. So it really sounds like it's in a space now and it fits in this world. Another reason you should aim to make them sound different is because it'll probably take a lot of work to get all these weird things to sound good together. So you should expect to end up with wildly different sounds from what you started with, and often you will end up veering into the territory of unnatural, which is totally fine, and I actually prefer that. We need to talk. It's really easy to reverse audio and slap some plugins on it to make it sound cool, but it can be quite challenging to make it actually sound like music. Here are some tips on how to create something musical. Keep it short. If you plan on crafting entire songs this way, it's important to keep it short. Playing music in reverse can produce some strange results, and listening to that music for any length of time can become tiresome. As I mentioned in the last video, creating loops out of audio clips can get stale very quickly, as you'll be listening to the same thing, sometimes for minutes at a time. Keep that in mind and either add variety with automation or keep it short. Make it sound like music. It's very easy to end up with something that sounds like noise, like in this example. You can make this noise more palatable by making it the backdrop of some kind of groove or some kind of melodic element, or both. On this album, I've created 2 other songs using this method, one of which was very ambient and textural, and the other one was closer to what real players would do, with lots of clear melodic elements and rhythmic elements. So when you're using this reverse technique to make music, the full spectrum of possibilities is still available to you as if you were writing music. So the music in this video is just one example, and don't think that you can only create noise with it. So a big factor in making this sound musical will be the form of your piece. Even if you do make something that sounds like noise, you can still make it relatable and understandable by sticking to conventional formal structures. So this piece uses a very simple form of just an intro and followed by an AABA. Even though the middle sections can sound chaotic and random, it works because of 3 things. First, it is the middle or B section of a piece, and typically anything goes during these sections. 2, it has its own mini form of an intro, build-up, and climax, which is very easy to understand. And 3, we used some parts of this middle section in the outro as well. Repetition legitimizes. So if we go back to that middle section, this is how it starts. So to make this part kind of make sense, I kind of bookended this section with that same thing. And then also talking about reusing parts from the middle section in the outro, I use that same little hit again here. So you'll hear it when we get there. So it's a really small thing, but it still brings you back to the middle section and connects both of those worlds together for you. And finally, make sure you actually like it. Just because something sounds new and edgy doesn't mean it sounds good. And just because you're doing something that nobody else does doesn't make it good either. If you're unsure, set it aside for a few days and come back to it. And if you're still unsure, that's probably a good sign that at the very least something needs to be tweaked, or you just need to go back to the drawing board. If your reaction was anything like mine, then you're probably realizing that you've just opened up a huge can of worms. It has become a habit for me to listen to my recordings in reverse, just to see if there's even the smallest nugget that could provide some inspiration. I'll often use this trick to add embellishments to my music too, which can add a lot of ear candy. Alas, that will be the subject of another video. My name is Nick Gaumont. Please like and subscribe. Milk your music.